Hi everyone, this is Tommy. Thank you for watching my video as always. Today's topic, which was requested, is about approaches for the deep external rotator muscles. Let's get started right away. First, I'd like to introduce the location of the deep external rotator muscles. The deep external rotators, as the name suggests, are a group of muscles located very deep in the hip that rotate the hip joint outward. Specifically, these muscles are attached to the pelvis. They're a group of 6 muscles located beneath the gluteal muscles and sitting on top of the pelvis. The most well-known of these muscles is the piriformis, which originates from the sacrum. Below the piriformis are the superior and inferior gemellus muscles. There's also an opening at the front of the pelvis formed by the pubic bone and ischium called the obturator foramen. The internal and external obturator muscles originate from this foramen. Additionally, there's a muscle called the quadratus femoris that directly connects the ischium to the femur. These 6 muscles, the piriformis, superior gemellus, inferior gemellus, internal obturator, external obturator, and quadratus femoris, are collectively known as the deep external rotators. As mentioned earlier, they're external rotators, so their primary function is to rotate the femur outward. They connect the back of the pelvis to the posterior or medial side of the femur. When you contract, the back of the femur rotates towards the pelvis. As a result, the femur turns outward, causing the toes and knees to point outwards. This movement is possible due to the deep external hip muscles. However, these muscles can be quite challenging to access. They're located beneath a thick layer of muscle fibers, making it difficult to reach them through massage or manipulation. Stretching can be effective for targeting these areas, but without understanding the muscle fiber orientation, it's hard to stretch effectively. There are several key points to consider when approaching these muscles. Let's go through them, starting with the basic principles of movement. One common feature of all deep external hip muscles is that they originate from the pelvis, and they all insert onto the femur. So, when stretching, it's crucial to first stabilize the pelvis. With the pelvis fixed, we then aim to move the femur. This movement can be broken down into 3 parts. The first part is hip joint flexion. When the hip joint is straight, the muscle's origin and insertion points are too close together, making it impossible to stretch effectively. Therefore, it's important to first bring the hip joint into a flexed position. Then, while keeping the hip joint in a flexed position, the next step is to rotate the femur inward. By rotating it inward, we further increase the distance between the starting point and the end point. From there, we move into an inward rotation and a cross-body motion. With the pelvis fixed, we're going to flex the hip joint, rotate it inward, and then move it inward. By taking this position, the start and end points of the muscle become very far apart, so you can achieve a greater stretch. What's crucial here is the angle of the femur. Now, can you see the relationship between the pelvis and the femur? At the front of the pelvis, there's a bone called the pubic bone. If you try to stretch in a position where the femur covers this pubic bone, you might feel a sensation of jamming or pinching in the inner part of the hip joint. The angle of the femur is high when initiating the adduction movement. Instead, if you flex the hip joint and lower the knee position slightly, it will be more effective. When you position the femur below the pelvis and move into adduction, the back of the buttocks will stretch very well. If you feel a strong sensation or collision in the inner part of the hip joint during this stretch, it's likely that the angle of the femur is not optimal. In such cases, it's better to lower the knee position a bit more before moving into adduction. The cardiac outline muscles all originate from the pelvis and attach to the back of the femur. Therefore, when stretching, you want to move the femur while keeping the pelvis fixed. The movement consists of 3 stages. The first stage is the hip flexion movement. You should bring your leg to a position where it's roughly perpendicular to the bed. From there, apply an inward rotation while maintaining the flexed position, and then move into adduction, crossing the legs inward. At this point, it's crucial to pay attention to the angle of both the limb and the femur. If the knee position is too high, it will inevitably cause a collision or a pinching sensation. When you experience this collision, lowering the knee angle a bit more before moving into adduction will result in a much more effective stretch. Some clients may have particularly tight hip joints. While the movement I've just described is ideal, it may need to be modified for individual needs. As for the movement that comes just before the best movement, if you bend your knees at 90 degrees, you'll end up moving them inward. It's like crossing your feet. When you try to get into this position, your pelvis will likely rotate in the opposite direction as well. When the pelvis and thigh bone fall in the same direction, the start and end positions won't be far apart. So if you tilt your foot back and rotate your pelvis slightly, I think it's also good to open the front of the pelvis in the opposite direction, towards the front. Keep your crossed feet in place and twist your pelvis in the opposite direction. This movement will also give a great stretch to the external oblique muscles. Please try to think about approach patterns while observing the receiver's reaction. Above all, stretching involves the origin and insertion of muscles and the direction of muscle fibers. If you can't visualize these three things, you won't be able to create effective movements. So I think it's best to start by studying muscles first. I'll include more detailed muscle information in the summary section, so please check it out if you're interested. That's all for today's video. Looking forward to next time. Thank you as always. Thanks for your requests. See you again soon.